Again, I'm Lorenzo Smith, the Associate Dean of the School of Engineering and Computer Science. And I really appreciate what James and actually all of you have done. This is really a wonderful opportunity to learn more about cybersecurity. My background is mechanical engineering, so I'm not going to pretend to be an expert. These guys are the experts. You guys are all experts to me, relative to myself. But you know, when I talk to students about, particularly engineering students, before I talk about computer science and IT, when I define engineering, I say, you know, it's the creative application of science to make the world a better place. And what you're doing through this organization is really just that. It's the creative application of computer science and IT to make the world a safer place. And I just have to tell you that I am so appreciative of what people like Eric and so many other staff members at Oakland University have done for me. I can't operate without them. So with that, I just want to let you know that on behalf of Dean Shamra, the Dean of the School of Engineering and Computer Science, you have our full support. This is something that's special to us because this is an organization, a student club that is organically grown. It comes from you. And you know, all that interest is coming from the students, and also we have staff members who are supporting that, but that's what really makes it special. You have the support of the faculty members. I see Dr. Fu back there, but really it's all about you. And I encourage you to not just be involved by sitting there. Many of you guys are going to ask questions, but as you know, you get what you put into your studies. You get what you put into an organization like this. I charge you to really put 100% effort into this student organization. I think I already see it growing, and I expect to see even greater things in the years to come. So again, my name is Lorenzo Smith. Come see me. Stop by the Dean's office. I'm happy to help you in any way that I can. Welcome, and I will step out of the way and let you enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, and I also want to take the time to thank a couple people. Dr. D, who is the Dean of MIS here in the Business Department, and Amy Rutledge and the AI Club for co-sponsoring this event. And lastly, I want to introduce you to Dr. Fu back there. She's our club sponsor. Dr. Fu, I want to wave your hand real quick. Okay. Dr. Fu is our club sponsor, and she has been a great support for us from the very beginning. So thank you, Dr. Fu. All right, next I'm going to hand it to Flavius. He's going to introduce himself to you, and we will get the show on the road.
Hi guys, my name is Flavius Poppin. I am the Vice President of CyberOU. I currently work for RL Polk as a network engineer, and I'm also in the Army National Guard as an IT specialist. And I'm a senior getting my bachelor's degree in IT pretty soon. Now over to Eric.
My name is Eric Mull. I work for the Science and Engineering building. I'm a computer network administrator. I work with Eric Stevens. And I'm a CIT major, probably got about 2 years left. And
I'm George Corser. I'm a privacy researcher in the computer science department. I work for Dr. Fu. I do research on vehicle privacy, how to protect vehicles, location privacy, things of that nature.
I'm RJ Fisher. I'm a senior. I'm an IT and infrastructure project manager at Consumers Energy. I'm getting a degree in IT. Should be out here by April.
Tripko Lajewski. I'm an IT major here at OU, senior. I'll be graduating in April, and I work at Continental Automotive doing software industrialization.
My name is Arno Crowther. I work in Elliott Hall as a systems administrator for the business department. I am an undergraduate student for the CIT program, and I'm also the creative director and webmaster for CyberOU.
I'm Eric Stevens. I have my bachelor's in computer science from Oakland University, and I'm currently employed as a network administrator for the School of Engineering and Computer Science.
All right. So today we're going to talk to you a lot about security, but before we can get into that, I think we need to find out what type of hardware that's most suited for each one of us. So can you guys just kind of explain to the crowd here, what are some things that you should look for when you're buying a new computer?
I can start. Well, firstly, this panel discussion was kind of labeled as an open floor Q&A. We have a few questions that we're going to go through on our own, just to kind of set the environment and just expose you guys to some of the topics that we cover and the things that we're all interested in. And then afterwards, we're going to open up the floor and you guys can ask whatever's on your mind, be it security related or not. So I guess when purchasing a new computer, actually this question has gotten more and more relevant, in my opinion, as of late, because it seems like all the hardware that comes out in the last few months/years is capable of handling almost anything that a normal student would do when it comes to word processing, internet browsing. The Chromebooks are basically like a super thin client that there's not really much hardware in them, but they're still capable just because of the internet connectivity. You do everything in the cloud. But I guess when I was looking for a computer, I needed something that was reliable and fun to use, so I bought a Mac. That's me. Any other opinions? No.
I agree with you a little bit, Lavius, but in terms of security, a lot of the computers and hardware that we have now are going to be more than adequate, and you shouldn't really have to look very hard for a secure platform.
So what's like, let's say, engineering student, what is the difference of, or what type of stuff that people should look at when they're purchasing a computer next to like a comm major or English major in terms of processing power? How should we go about that in choosing the right computer for our major?
I think the most important thing is probably to have enough memory or RAM. It's nice to be able to spin up virtual machines inside of your laptop and run virtual servers that way, so you can deploy to web servers and things like that.
Can you explain to us a little bit elaborate a little more on what virtual machines are?
A virtual machine is a computer inside of a computer. So and why I say you need extra memory is because you have to kind of split up your computer into segments and allocate that to the virtual machine inside of it. So you could be running a Mac like this and have a Windows 7 virtual machine on it, and you can switch back and forth. And you can do the same thing with server software too. So if you have a web server running, and you can do your development on the Mac, and then you could switch over to Windows 7 and make sure it looks good in Internet Explorer. So you have that flexibility when you use virtual machines.
And can one of you please elaborate a little more on what like processors are and how does that affect the decision of buying a computer?
Take that one. Okay. Processor is like the brain of the computer. Nowadays, it's not really as big of an issue as it was a little while ago. Quite a few years ago, Macs used PowerPC as their processor, which didn't allow them to play very nice with Windows machines. That's why there was that big rift between Mac users and Windows users, because they didn't really get along. And then Apple decided to switch to Intel processors. Now the other big competitor are ARM CPUs. They're usually more common in tablets and phones. They can't really do the same things that an Intel processor can, but they're pretty close. And I think those are the two big competitors that you see nowadays. So like RJ's got the Surface tablet. I'm pretty sure that uses ARM. The rest of us are probably using Intel. At the moment, something you should always invest in is a computer that has at least like a Core i5. They're Intel's latest like baseline. They're a little higher end than I guess most lower end laptops, but they're kind of where you want to start. For desktop PCs, you can also get an i5 that's a quad core, so you got 4 cores for performance. And if you really want some juice, the i7 line is pretty powerful, and you can keep up with Intel's processors. It's pretty interesting. And then got a question about 32 and 64-bit. If any of you guys have any confusion regarding 32-bit versus 64-bit on a computer, that describes the architecture of the CPU and how it handles RAM. To make this very simple, it's basically when you have 32-bit, you only have 4 gigs limitation on how much RAM you can put in your computer. So Windows XP 32-bit used to support only 4 gigs, and now that we've kind of advanced and most computers are shipping with 8 gigs, you need the ability to have a processor that can handle 64-bit architecture that can also scale up to about like 128 gigs of RAM, I think is what it can manage as its limit. And it's kind of it. You can spend a whole day talking about CPU architecture, but I think that's good enough cover.
Can I add something here? How many of you guys out there know what kind of processor your computer has?
Oh man, all right. We have to bump this up into.
Okay, now don't be ashamed, because how many of you don't know? Only one? I know there's more of you. Thanks for being brave. You score points on that. Obviously we got a very technical crowd here.
Yep.
In the old days, the CPU speed really was the most important thing. Nowadays, it's how many cores does it have. But of course, that doesn't matter unless you have an application software that uses all the cores. You can have software that just uses 1 core, and you're not getting anything out of your system. if this audience already knows all this stuff,
Yep.
we should still keep it, on an even keel. I believe what Eric said is correct, that you can never have too much RAM. Just buy as much as you can afford. Generally speaking, what I've seen is the machines that are for sale, they cut costs because they want to keep the price under a certain level, and the easiest way to do that is to reduce the RAM. So what do? We buy a computer that doesn't have enough RAM, and we think the computer's slow. The second time around, we load up on RAM and we pay more money, right? We all have extra RAM in our machines because that's really what you need. Now the other thing about the 32-bit and 64-bit architecture is, if you have old software, which maybe you guys are too young to have old software, but you will get to the point where you do. You need to be able to run the 32-bit systems on something. You can run them on a VM, which is what I do. I put XP, 32-bit XP, on VMware, and VMware only runs 32-bit anyway. I think the player that I use only has 32-bit on it, but I guess you pay it. Is that right? I'm not sure. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. But the point of it is that chances are, wherever level you're at in your computer purchasing, you always want to know that next level of edge. But these days, it's processor speed, and you can never have enough. Number of processors and the amount of RAM.
Yeah, you can never have too powerful of a machine.
You can't have enough processors either. You can get a Tesla, or you can get one of these NVIDIA machines that have 512 or 1024 processors. How many of you guys are gamers? How many of you have a GPU in your system?
How many of you know what CUDA is, or what it means?
How many of you programmed in
CUDA.
CUDA? How many? Only 2 people? Wow, this is a pretty advanced crowd.
Yeah. Well, I guess next thing we can kind of move along. I think we cover all the basics of what we should look for in terms of buying a computer. So I think the next big thing that we should look for is kind of what operating system is the best, or in your opinion, and why it's better than the rest. So we're going to spark the Windows versus Mac debate here a little bit.
All right, I'll start. I guess one of the assumptions that we've made in our discussion, we talked about computers, but we didn't really talk about what a computer is. When we've been talking about laptops and desktops kind of implicitly. But more and more computers are taking different form factors, and operating systems definitely show that. I mean, your phone has an operating system, your Xbox has an operating system, your router at home has an operating system. I don't know. Your radio in your car. I mean, your watch might seem, unless you're an early adopter.
Your car.
So I think it's important when we're having a discussion like this about operating systems to remember that each operating system has different goals.
What is the best personal computer operating system?
Yeah, so if we narrow it down that way. So then you've got 3 real options in my mind, which is Linux in all its variants. We'll just clump it together, I think. Apple and Windows. And even Windows, I mean, there's 4 variants that are supported right now, I think. XP, Vista, 7 and 8. Yeah, and the servers, which actually are a fantastic product. But we already said desktop operating systems, so I'm atypical because I generally run from a command line unless I'm web browsing. So I'll compare those quickly, and you guys don't have to make the comment. 1980s called and they want the command line back. They're really efficient, and I get my work done much faster because I take the time to learn how to do things that way. So with Vista, Windows came out with PowerShell, which is a scripting language and interactive terminal. And it's fantastic. Until then, I think Linux and Mac would have won the debate hands down, but PowerShell's really added a lot to Windows, and you add that to its flexibility and its support in the enterprise, and I'd say that's a good safe bet in my favor.
I'd like to add on, for anyone who does gaming or just personal computers, my opinion is Windows is the best to use. So many games are dependent on operating system that they won't work on Linux or Mac, and you have to find specific types of games for those operating systems. And for at-home users that just need to do homework and stuff like that, I wouldn't recommend Linux. It's got a large learning curve to it. It's more for administrative type roles, in my opinion. Eric might disagree with that. He's got a Linux at home, but that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'd agree with Eric on that, and for drivers and things like that, it usually makes your life easier on a Windows platform. Usually Linux people have a little harder time finding drivers and things for printers, cameras, various things. End up recompiling kernels and trying to make things work, which for your average user, they're not going to be able to get into something as advanced.
Alright, so for fun, let's take a quick vote. How many Linux users do we have in here? Okay, a few. How many Windows, mainly Windows? Okay, okay. Any Mac guys in here? Yeah, Mac. Okay, so yeah,
The
personally,
great thing is we don't have to decide. I mean, we can
Yeah.
we can have the best of everything.
yeah,
And,
virtual machines.
Not only that, I have a dedicated gaming PC at home that I just built to have this for school, and then I have a dedicated Linux backtrack Catalyst Linux thing for all that. So you can split them up. It doesn't, one's best for something that the other's not. So don't be afraid to collect.
Given that this is a security discussion, though, I think we should talk about which operating system is most secure. And I think we can pretty much agree the least secure is Windows.
Yeah.
It has the most known vulnerabilities at any given point in time. They track these online. The most secure, in my opinion, is going to be Linux, and that's because the source code is open. Anytime you have completely open source code, you have a lot of eyes looking for security vulnerabilities, a lot of smart eyes. So it's generally considered safer to use open source software than closed source software.
Well, I guess to go along with that point is, I guess we can kind of talk about what are some basic security practices that we should kind of all be aware of and be constantly practicing. So if you could kind of discuss about that a little bit here.
Well, as we all know, it's very important to have antivirus software on our computers. But a lot of people don't update it regularly. So, along with updating your virus definitions, having an active firewall on your computer, and avoiding malicious or sketchy-looking websites, that can go a long way to protect you from viruses.
I got a few things that are a little not as often talked about when it comes to like security practices, but still pretty good ideas. One is use an ad blocker. It's a little controversial to say that because maybe some websites that you want to support run ads, but what I found is from fixing a bunch of family members' computers, most of the issues that you have are people clicking the wrong download button or falling for like, no, I'm serious, like sometimes it happens. And by using an ad blocker, you kind of get rid of that error of margin that you would be that you can click something, and ads actually give you a lot of crap. Most of it won't do malicious stuff that's technically illegal, but adware is legal, and my girlfriend accidentally clicked a link once, and her computer like filled up with crap, and it was legal. It was on download.com, and so that caused quite a bit of trouble. So use an ad blocker and also install it for your family's PCs. Your mom's going to thank you. It's going to make your life a lot easier. She's not going to call you as often about that. And full disk encryption is another thing I would say. It's pretty easy to do this. For Mac, there's File Vault. You should pretty much enable it and let it do its thing. It's kind of like a magical shell around your hard drive that keeps people from stealing your laptop, and even if they don't have your password to log into Windows, they can still take your hard drive out and then just plug it into another computer and start pulling all your files. Well, with full disk encryption, it kind of locks and seals all that stuff in, so even if they get your hard drive, it's not as useful. And then in Windows, it's BitLocker for Windows 7, the higher end version of it. That's something simple that you can do that will pretty much do a whole lot for you, more so than having crazy password generating schemes and all that.
Definitely. Faith, as you talk about passwords, so I want to talk a little bit about what makes up a good password. Like a space is definitely not a good password, right? A lot of people, that's probably one of your first guesses when you're trying to attack getting the computer. So can we just kind of talk a little about what makes up a strong password?
One of the biggest things that you need to have is not make your password. I'm serious. If you go into like a corporation or if you go into like a school of engineering computer science and you happen to, let's just say there's going to be a lot of John Browns, J Brown 1, password, enter. If you keep clicking through it, you're going to hit somebody that does that. So one of the best things that they have for recommendations, Windows at least has a 8-character minimum security requirement for a password, and then mix of numbers, characters, uppercase, special character. People get like these really weird passwords. Sometimes you'll see like I, capital J, number sign, 2, password, they'll type it, and then whatever. So what this is it's a passphrase. This is what I do. So when I go and try to make a new password and it says it's expired, I'll think of a phrase like, I like to eat apples and bananas. And so what I'll do is I'll say, okay, capital I, L for like, number 2 for 2, and then I'll just mix and match, and so it looks like this really weird and chronic phrase, but I'll remember that phrase instead of saying, okay, well, I'm going to make my password my mom's maiden name and then add her birthday to it. Nobody will guess it. People have done that before. So you want to make it something that you're going to remember, and passphrases are at least my favorite thing to do. Again, 8 characters minimum. If you try to set up a Windows server, they're going to kick you out if you say anything less than 8 characters, and it has to match uppercase, lowercase mixed numbers, capitals, special characters, and it can't be non-dictionary too. Don't put anything in the dictionary in your password, please. Please don't. That's terrible.
Raise your
Because
hand.
people have... Go ahead. No,
I was going to say, raise your hand if you've ever heard the phrase correct horse battery staple. Oh man, that's
Does anybody like XKCD comics?
There's a comic out there that kind of goes over password complexity. That's like, you can come up with these insane ways to like generate your password, but sometimes just making up a really ridiculous combination of words that mean nothing is way more secure. And they went into a little bit of the math behind it. It's actually kind of true. So that's kind of like an inside
Can we
joke.
get that on the board?
But sometimes if you need a good password, just come up with some four random words and just smush them together. Correct horse battery staple. It's pretty common if you want to.
Yeah, and next week we'll actually, if you guys will be meeting in room 203, and we'll be actually cracking some password, and you guys can actually test out how secure is your password. So,
We talk a lot about the technical things, but sometimes we forget the human factor. How easy is it to remember? And I believe that we should be able to, all these schemes we come up with, we should be able to remember them easily. And the other problem is, people tend to use the same password on everything. Now, the IEEE was hacked. It wasn't really hacked. A programmer discovered a page on their website that had all the passwords on it of all their users. That's no big deal because who cares about the IEEE, right? You're not going to steal anything. But those people probably use the same password for other accounts. So the question I would ask myself, and I do ask myself, is how do I get a complicated password like what RJ was talking about, but that's easy to remember, and it's not the same for every single account that I use? How many of you guys here do that? Interesting.
Yeah, raise your hand if you.
Okay, so a few people do that. Now, we all have... But I'm going to suggest a way that you can have a different password for every single account that's unique, that's easy to remember, very easy to remember, and that's very complicated, that's hard to crack with brute force. Here's the method. If you come up with a sentence, it can be in your if you speak 2 languages, come up with a different language. Like I might use one out of Shakespeare. Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Capital R, capital W, A-T-Y, capital R, question mark. And if you type that sentence often enough, if it's a sentence you know, you can type that sentence fast. Obviously, you can go with a longer sentence, you can have 2 sentences together, but you can have the punctuation in there, so you're going to get capital letters, punctuation, and if you change one of the letters to a number, like A's can be 4 or whatever it is, then you have yourself a complete, robust, complicated password. Now, that solves problem 1. Easy to remember and it's a complicated password. Problem 2 is you want to have a different password for every account. Now, I've found that even on Oakland University, there was an Oakland University website I worked on when I first got here, it truncated your password when you typed it in. So you could have a long, long password, but it's only using the first 8 characters of it. So I suggest to you, in case you run across one of these kludgy password schemes, put a prefix, not a suffix, on that sentence scheme that I just mentioned. So the prefix could be the first letter of the account, that you're logging into. So it's bank, it could be B, or it could be the first number of that bank account or whatever it might need to be, right? So you have to come up with a prefix that's unique, but that might, by itself, help you remember. You might recognize what the account is, but when you couple it with that unique password, nobody can necessarily get that. You could also, what we call Caesar cipher the prefix, which just means shift the character by 1. So if it's a bank, shift it to the letter C instead of B. Do you see what I'm saying? The important thing isn't what we do with, that you use my particular scheme, but that we think about those 3 issues. How complicated is it to be cracked? How easy is it to remember? And how unique is it from account to account?
My strategy is a little different. I don't care about remembering it. So if you're willing to give up the ability to remember your passwords, it makes that problem a little bit easier. What they've both been talking about is called passphrases. And if we look at, so what's happened in the past is large databases of usernames and passwords have been stolen, and they're all encrypted. So they're just a bunch of gibberish, and they post them on the internet, and then they go through and they try to crack them. So using something like password is going to get hit in the first run. But over time, as more and more people work on this long list, they get more and more passwords. And this goes to George's point about why it's a horrible idea to use the same password ever again, because you don't trust every site you're going to. And you can't. So if there's one attack at that particular site, maybe a game you go to or something, you don't want to be able to get into your other accounts. So that point is very important. But the passphrases themselves, while much more secure than traditional passwords, they have been cracked in these schemes, and they're published. And the ones that are most likely to get cracked are ones that are like Bible verses, or even famous literature verses. Basically anything that you can Google and get more than 1,000 hits on. If you just use a passphrase and then switch the letters around, they still get cracked. The algorithms crack them really well. So George's point of adding a couple prefix is a good idea. I would call that adding a salt, because it's just changing up the base model you have, which is a good idea. But I use a tool called KeyPass, and it's a storage tool for all your passwords. And it's complicated, I won't explain it all, but basically I generate long, random passwords, usually 20 characters or more. And I don't remember a single one of them, except for the password to get into my password manager. Once in a while I'll remember one or two, but usually I forget it next week. It frees up a lot of brain power, so I recommend not remembering your passwords.
Yeah, to kind of go along with that point of password software, are there any other tools out there that can kind of better protect yourself from a hacker to you're trying to get into your account or try to gain access to any information that you might have?
I'd like to mention a couple things, because the password, if we don't do anything else today, the password is the #1 thing that you need to secure. As far as I'm concerned, if we had to pick anything in security, what do you need to know? You absolutely can't escape. It's the password. It's the weakest link in the chain. And I like to remember my passwords because I like to use the passwords in places where I might not have access to that KeyPass thing, but I think the KeyPass is probably a better idea. But assuming that you want to be able to remember your password, I don't know, I like my method. But another thing that people don't think about is never answer the question, what is your mother's maiden name, with your mother's maiden name. And people, we can have all the fancy passwords we want, but if the password recovery system is too easy, that defeats the whole purpose. So you have to use the same technique that I mentioned before on your password recovery system. You might want to prefix it or salt it. It could be the 2nd or 3rd or 5th letter, whatever you want to do. So, I mean, you could have the most complicated password, but if everybody knows your mother's maiden name, they can go and they can reset it. Doesn't make a difference, right? Another thing I like to do, and maybe I'm a little bit too paranoid about this, but I like to be able to type my password in complete darkness. I cover my hand with a blanket, I try to type my password without seeing what I'm typing, so that and so I can practice it. And because there might be a time, I've never had to do this, but there might be a time when I want to cover my hands so nobody can see what I'm typing, but I want to be able to get my password in there. I may seem a little paranoid, but also just convenient when you're in the dark, you wake up in the middle of the night, get your computer, you can't see. Now that may be taking it too far, I don't know, but I think the password's very important.
All right, shifting more towards actual useful tools, a couple of recommendations. Malwarebytes, anti-malware, great free application, finds, removes malware. For those of you who don't know, but based on the crowd, I'm sure you all do know what malware is. Malicious software, essentially, it's software used by or programmed by attackers to disrupt a computer operation, so they try to gather sensitive information, gather access to your files and things like that. So that's a great free utility. It'll scan your computer, find anything on there, and you can get rid of it. For antivirus, AVG, free antivirus software there. That's actually available Linux on Mac as well for that. And then you can also get into more advanced paid versions of AVG, but for your average user, AVG free does a pretty good job. It also has a link scanner part in there, so when you are searching on Google and things like that, it's going to scan the sites that are in your results and kind of let you know whether you don't want to go to those or, okay, they're fine. Another little utility, CCleaner, it kind of removes all your temporary internet files and things like that, and you can also go into your registry and clean that up with that, which is pretty neat. And then on encryption, which was mentioned earlier, there's a thing called TrueCrypt, free, open source, and you can use that, encrypt files, or you could even encrypt your whole entire hard drive, kind of like Flavius was talking about earlier. And then obviously you have your disk defragmenter, disk cleanup, and all your built-in Windows utilities that most of you know about or have used.
Yeah, Tripco, I know you talk a lot about virus, like malwares and all that stuff. So what should you do when you get a virus? Like, should you just run to
Throw your computer away?
Yes, other than that,
Chuck it at a wall?
run to the nearest IT.
Or go fight Eric, right?
Yeah. So what are some steps that should be taken when you get a virus? And do I just scream for help and hopefully somebody hear me, or?
All right.
I think, just a side question to probably ask before that, how do you know when you get a virus? Because how do you fix it if you don't know that you have one? Maybe something we want to discuss first.
Ask your friends if they've gotten emails from you that you didn't send. Because a few years after high school, I started getting emails from people I haven't talked to in years, and I thought they were just, being like nice and trying to remember me, but it was more that their accounts got jacked, and now
Trying to
they're
sell you medication.
yeah, that kind of medication. Their email accounts got jacked, and now they're sending everyone on their list spam from years ago. So that's a good indication. You might want to be a good buddy and tell them that their stuff is not secure and all that. That's one way. That's the most common for me nowadays.
I think a lot of time can help. Like your computer, for me personally, sometimes when I do get a virus, my computer slows down. So I think that might be a pretty good indication that you might have a virus. So
If you have a
Random
fast
passwords.
antivirus, it's going to be very loud and tell you very, very loud things.